Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here at the Freedom Forum, and I would like to again welcome Yves Potvin. Welcome, Yves.
Good morning, good day.
No worries. Pleased to have you. What's the weather like in Canada, Yves?
Uh, it's uh, it's okay. We got some nice weather, but everybody's worried about that storm on the East Coast,
Yeah,
which
that's
we're
right.
not close. We're not close to it, but it's going to affect us in some ways. But
Yep.
the weather is okay. We're in the barely 20s.
Mhm.
Like it was 18 yesterday,
Yep.
and at night it gets even cooler. So it was
Mhm.
7 yesterday.
Mhm.
The night went down to 7.
Yep.
So it's cool, but I sleep well in that weather. I don't like hot weather.
Yeah. No worries. I'm actually going to cut across to a website. Let me just change the website, and I just want to bring this particular website up just for the sake of the discussion. The it shows here the map of, if you like, the east coast of the United States and the path of this hurricane as it's going through. But it's also showing that it's dissipating down to a level 3 and then a level 2 as its ongoing track there. So I think that that in itself is a good thing. A good thing that it hasn't wreaked the havoc that was anticipated, although the Bahamas has been heavily hit. And I recognise that, and I'm really sorry to hear that it's just such a difficult thing for those people that are there. But it heading to the more I mean, let's put it in perspective. Is it more heavily populated on that southeast coast of United States, and are there more people going to be affected? But it's still tough news for the people in the path of this hurricane. So yeah, we're acknowledging that it is a difficult time for them, and our prayers and our hopes are with them at this time. No worries. Now, our subject for tonight, the national dividend, it's an interesting subject because it's actually, in my view, it's one of the most responsible environmental proposals that I've ever taken the time to actually consider. And that is that, I just wanted to place this thought in people's minds that if the price system, in other words, you produce something that actually incorporates all the costs that go into production, including raw materials, labour, depreciation of plant and equipment, rent, utilities, all those sorts of things, the price system says that that product has to sell for a certain price, or the costs that the industry are actually accumulating in producing it aren't liquidated. Now, the fact is that the community at the moment cannot buy what the community produces because the price system is is not fully liquidating. It is not self-liquidating. There's not enough going out in the form of wages, dividends, salaries to actually liquidate the cost of the producing the articles. And so if you happen to have, let's just consider, say you've got an area that produces a lot of fruit, the people who are paid to harvest the fruit, to process the fruit, canneries, all that sort of stuff, the wages and salaries and dividends that actually go out for all of that never provide sufficient purchasing power in that community to buy it. And so it's to me that's a phenomena that has been recognised, and so industry always has to expand its markets. It has to go out and encroach on other markets in order to get sufficient liquidation back to liquidate the cost so the industry can continue. And of course, on the basis of that, you have industry continually expanding and in the end monopolising because it's the only way that they can get a sufficient return on investment to cover the cost of liquidation. Now, the national dividend recognises this inherent flaw in the price system and offers a solution. And that solution, of course, is sufficient spending power being issued debt-free to the individuals of community, all of the individuals of community, so that they can actually liquidate the cost of production, so that as things are being produced, they can be purchased. And that to me is a very, very important phenomena, because what it actually does, in my view, and this is the key to it, is it actually places a monetary vote, a monetary vote in the hands of the individuals in community. And they can actually endorse one manufacturer and disendorse another based on quality, reliability, service, all the sorts of things that you actually consider when you go to purchase something. So it really is a wonderful proposal. It actually takes power and it hands it back to the individual. And I think that's politically a most profound consideration. Eve, your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's all this production is the country's profit. The things that we've built. Uh, why did we build so much? Because it's possible. We can do it,
Mm-hmm,
but it's the profit that has been taken, has been denied to us, been denied to the people,
mm-hmm,
even though they are starving, even though they're struggling to even keep a family together,
mm-hmm,
and it drives people to drinking sometimes.
mm-hmm,
But that's what the world, I think, is being put under because of kind of a depression type of thing.
mm-hmm,
I have an article, Charles Pinwell, which is a colleague or a citizen of Australia.
mm-hmm,
Uh, he explained in an essay mentioning about Clifford Hugh Douglas. And as we know, C.H. Douglas, over 100 years ago, uh, created or wrote the social credit writings, and then he went to have a meeting in 1923 with the bankers that were there, and he was going to explain to him about the solution or the possibility of a better system around economy, around finance, and so Douglas concluded that as consumer incomes were insufficient to buy the consumer products offered, that this would best rectify the declaring of surplus to be a profit
mm-hmm,
and distributing new money to consumers in the form of a national dividend to buy it,
mm-hmm,
which makes perfect sense.
mm-hmm,
So in 1923, Douglas was invited to dinner by New York's top bankers.
mm-hmm,
I can imagine some of the names, but one of them was the American financier Bernard Baruch. He was among them, and Douglas thought it would have to argue technical details and was prepared to do this. He was going to defend what he had to say.
mm-hmm,
So the bankers took him by surprise, telling him that they completely accepted the diagnosis,
mm-hmm,
and all they wished to know is what was he going to do with it? What was he intended to do with that report? And so he said that we're going to have a dividend. We're going to educate the people about it. And so the banker said, where is it here? Distributed national dividend. The bankers made it clear that they were not interested in a national dividend issued by society.
mm-hmm,
That was they turned it right down,
mm-hmm,
even though they accepted his solution, his diagnosis. They weren't ready to. We're not allowed to be prosperous, I guess. It's and that's the way it's been for a long time. But you know what? It's the 21st century. We can put a man to the moon, on the moon, so we can probably come up with some kind of a solution, a technical solution maybe, but you could have a dividend and would be passed by the present government if you want to, and you
mm-hmm,
pass it as law, and it would be run as a law.
mm-hmm,
And the government wouldn't get involved with that particular part, but the credit office would probably take care of it. Maybe the Bank of Canada. Here in Canada, we have a central bank that hasn't been used in 50 years, believe it or not.
mm-hmm,
Close to 50 years, 40, 45 years. And it would it hasn't done its function in that amount of time.
yeah,
It's not doing its function. Although our dollar our dollars, our money says Bank of Canada,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. But it's put out by the by private banks. The government has nothing to do at all with those. And they mentioned somebody, oh, the Bank of Canada, the rate for the interest or whatever is 3.2 or whatever it is. And they think it's the Bank of Canada that's issuing that new rule and the money.
Mm.
So I we write a little article here on the social dividend, and it says social dividend will save the planet, and consumerism will destroy it.
Yeah.
Will destroy the planet. So
Hmm.
we have to. They have carbon tax now that came out. You may be involved with the carbon tax yourself,
Hmm.
and the elections are coming up soon, and they're brainwashing people into thinking that the environment needs to be held because of this climate change, this global warming or whatever.
Hmm.
So we have to have carbon tax. We're going to help the people save the environment. So that's one of the platforms by I think the liberals,
Hmm.
because they put out this carbon tax, and if people don't, for example, if a gas station doesn't collect the carbon tax, they're going to be fined $10,000 a day.
Yeah.
$10,000 a day.
Hmm.
So the people are put under kind of a chain.
Mm. The way I see it with the carbon tax and everything else, I'm getting a bit of feedback here, I'll keep going, is that it's got to do with power. It's got to do with power. At the moment, the banks have everyone, including the government, under duress through credit creation. They can indebt, and they do indebt governments. I mean, just consider Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Ireland. They're all so heavily indebted. And of course, the assets have been stripped from those nations because of the debt. But the fact is that private banks are issuing new credits of their own volition. They're issuing new credits of their own volition, and the governments historically have actually handed that sovereignty over to private individuals, the owners of the banks. And that to me is an absolutely phenomenal consideration. It's to do with power. Those individuals, 100 years ago when Douglas pointed this out, they knew exactly what he was talking about. They were no way, Jose, were they going to relinquish power back to the individuals in community. And that's what the national dividend is about. You see, the argument, if you like, with King John and Magna Carta, the barons were forcing King John to abide by the law of the land and not exploit the situation for his own ends. And banks are doing that. Banks, the owners of banks do that every single day. Because when a new loan comes out, say to build a bridge, a new loan comes out to build a bridge. Who builds the bridge? The bank does it. It's the community who actually makes the steel. They mine the iron ore, they make the steel, they transport it across, they get the raw materials, they mix the concrete, they put it all together. The engineers do the designing. It's actually the community that does it all. But the issuing of the credit in order to release the community to do it is issued by private individuals, and this power is inordinate. It is inordinate. The power of the banks is inordinate. Now you come back to King John. When he had that power, the barons took it back from him. And since then, of course, supposedly the evolution through Britain of Parliament, Westminster system, is that power resides in Parliament. And now that power has been taken from Parliament, given to the executive, given to the bureaucrats, but they have actually subordinated Parliament, the bureaucracy, industry, individuals to banks. They've actually subordinated everyone. And so this power that has been resisted since the Roman times, it's been resisted since Christians first decided that actually the individual is the one who should be making their own decisions. They can't be free if they can't make decisions. And their freedom was actually undone. So to me, this whole question of banking credit creation, which Douglas showed, is responded to, this power issue is responded to by bringing power, the financial power, back to the individual. That's what the national dividend is about. And it is most important. The community makes these things. It builds the roads, it builds the bridges, the schools, the harbours. It's the farmers who are producing the food. It's the engineers who are doing the designing. But the banks claim all of this as their own and they have no right to it. And the power has to come back to the individual. It is so important. Eve.
Yes, I've got a cat here that's trying to open the door. We hope he keeps out. Yeah, I talked to farmers. I was last Saturday. I was a meat market, or not a meat market, a produce market,
Mm-hmm,
produce,
mm-hmm,
and I went to talk to people there and pass some leaflets and ask them their opinion. Ask them, here's a solution, and people were actually listening to me.
mm-hmm.
Uh, wanting to know, oh, what do you mean, and they ask questions and stuff like that, which is very, when I have a day like that, it's enlightening because people are going out that Saturday morning to go shopping with their wives, their family, and they pick fresh fruit and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And they enjoy that morning because it's kind of a freedom time.
Mm-hmm.
And but they're worried about what they can buy. How
Yeah.
much can I buy? Well, we'll buy this and buy that. We only got so much cash or whatever. Uh, but when you talk to the people and you mention to them, well, thank you very much. I'll make sure to read this.
Mm.
As yeah, you must. And so a lot of people are very much so worried about everyday life. I mean, my financial life right now is not very good, so I worry about that. So my wife worries about it, and then my kids, and then my neighbor, and
Mm-hmm.
they all have worries that it would make people so happy to have a national dividend.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when the allocation came out in the 60s in Canada. I think it was in Quebec only. I'm not sure. But we were getting $6 per child.
Okay.
My mind. Then it went up to 10. So $10 a month was, although it wasn't much, it was a bit more than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
But in those days, that $10 that came once a month, my mother really looked after it and said, this is what we're going to do with this, and so on and so forth. So it was a great help to every family, even though it was only $10. They
Yeah.
could buy some food, they could buy, it would help with their. So can you imagine today the same dividend that matches the overproduction,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the extra production that's available? If we had a dividend for that, the world would be that much better off because they would the retailer would be happy because he would sell his product, and the consumer would be happy because they get finally some quality food. Maybe they're instead of
Mm-hmm.
buying cheap hamburger, they're going to buy a better brand of hamburger and buy
Mm-hmm.
some good honey.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it would play. So we have to really push the idea that the people has to regain the power, their power to create money.
Yeah.
The country must create the money for the people,
Yeah.
not the private banks for a profit.
That's right.
That's the whole problem right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only a one-way system that they have, and it's a profit. They have that in that idea, and taking your goods away from you, your right to life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very important observation, even that the thing is that what we're talking about, anyone who is not sure of the validity of what we're saying is go to the debt clock. Go to the Canadian or Australian or world debt clock and have a look at it. And you will see that the debt is just spinning away, continuing to climb by the millions every minute, by the millions. And the thing is that that continuation of debt is in spite of the fact that we've got all this industry producing, 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 all these quarries digging up this and turning it into that, and all we are is just this whole consumerism going bunter, and we're only doing it because of this progressive debt. If we had a system that was in equilibrium, there was sufficient purchasing power to buy what we make, you wouldn't find that you'd be wanting to produce a new set of clothes every week and all that sort of stuff. And the advertising, you'd turn away from it. But the thing is that the advertising itself is compelling you that you can't even be happy if you don't go and have this or do that or go here and drive this or whatever or wear that. And it really is. It's psychologically um, putting you in a state of never actually being at peace, never actually being at peace and being content that there's a sufficiency. Now, consider, if you like, the potential of growing your own food, of actually having a home that is freehold and there's sufficient produce coming from your own home with we've got about 40 fruit trees on our block. It's not a particularly large block, but 40 fruit trees. And we've got chooks, and we've got in the back there's a bit of a paddock thing there, and okay, we supplement the feed, but we've got some young lambs there. And it's all part of what we're doing, and there is a sufficiency. We're confident that there's enough there for us to get by, especially with our beehives. By jingoes, with our beehives, there's so much food value coming in, so much nutrition, so much energy coming in with the beehives, as well as the fruit, vegetables, chooks, the eggs, meat, etc., etc. And so there's confidence in it, and we're not under duress. Now, why can't every family have something like that? Why is it that young people, they're coming out of university with huge debts, huge debts, and then no prospects of a future? The cost of housing is like telephone numbers and things like that. Debt is used as a weapon, and the thing is that young people, old people, reverse mortgages, all this sort of stuff. It's just power that the bankers have over the people. And the fact is, it's something that needs to be wrestled back. In Magna Carta, it was wrestled back from the monopoly tyrant king. And now we need to wrestle it back from the monopoly tyrant bankers, central bankers. We need to wrestle it back and place it in equilibrium so that what we're producing, we can buy. What we produce, we can buy. If it's physically possible, it should be economically possible. Yves.
Yeah, you mentioned about the debt clock,
Mm,
and I was doing some businesses last Friday, and I came upon one person. I mean, I talk to people about the debt clock all the time.
mm,
We've got trillions in debt. We're never going to be able to pay that. What are they going to do with us? And people should say, well, I'm still in business. I still run my business, and I sell all kinds of this stuff and this stuff. The guy I was talking to was in the wine business. Well,
mhm,
obviously, people want wine nowadays to
mhm,
forget their sorrows, so they will certainly buy a niche like the wine business.
mhm,
So, but the people, you tell them about the debt. You show them in our leaflet. We have the debt of the United States is it shows 20 trillion, and that was a few years ago.
mhm,
And the buildings, the high, tall buildings, are made out of $100 bills.
mhm,
They're sky high, like they have the high rise buildings, and that's the trillions of dollars that we owe.
mhm.
So it is not a sustainable system. And I mean, the bankers are leading us into an automatic power takeover if they don't have a lot of it already.
Mhm.
But like I said, I watched this movie last night and during the World War II there, and Hitler's and the Jews and Poland and all that, and you could see the power that these soldiers had. You couldn't even blink at them. They would just shoot you in a second.
Mhm.
So is this what our future will look like? Maybe when we have to pay the debt and they say, listen, I'm calling the debt. You
Mhm.
have to pay those debts. Just
Mhm.
like if I had a mortgage, the bank could come in my house
Mhm.
and they say, listen, we're calling your debt. We're
Yep.
calling your mortgage. Pay
Mhm.
it tomorrow morning
Mhm.
or you're out. They
Mhm.
have the power to do that.
Mhm.
So are they going to do that with the people of Canada, United, wherever in the world, and give us an ultimatum? I I hate to think what it's going to be like. You tell people, "Oh, come on," they would never let that happen again. You know that they can't do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you know who they are?
Mhm.
If you know who they are, you'll know that they're capable of doing it. If you know their history,
Mhm.
you know they're capable of putting the world under a terrible communist or socialist system.
Mhm.
It's already in the works, socialism. My colleague there, not too far from here, she was telling me that there's a teacher there's a couple of teachers that I left, and so this other teacher that knew everything about socialism and everything else came and replaced some of those teachers for a little while. And the little kids, like they're grade 5, 6, 7, and he would explain to them about socialism his own way. And so, what do you think about socialism? The kids would say, "Oh, we want socialism. Yeah, we want socialism." So, I mean, our kids are taught that very way now, even
Mhm.
though not in those words, but they are taught a socialist communist system because the kids don't know nothing else.
Yeah.
If socialism is going to free me from this, if I'm going to get a job and get paid and everything else, I want socialism.
Mhm.
So we're warning people, but sometimes maybe they'll read about it, and but they have the TV, they have the sports, they have the movies, they have the entertainment. We got to go to this show here. We got everybody is so busy with life. Of course, I did all that too. I'm not denying that I didn't do any of this, but it comes at times where we have to wake up. And people in those days didn't tell me about, you shouldn't. The future is going to be not very bright, so you better stop playing. You better
Yeah.
start working. So anyway, that's where I sit on this idea because where are we going to be in 10 years from now?
Yeah. I
What?
think it. I think it's a. I think you've touched on something that just needs to be amplified a bit here, Eve, and that is that you talked about work and an obligation to work, or at least an obligation to be responsible. But the fact is, you've got to just rattle people's cage on this one. That automation, advanced control, and robotics means that the jobs are not there. Industry is automating everything. In fact, their industry, there's hundreds or thousands of engineers developing labor-saving devices every single day so that machines can do all the work. Now, if you don't get any spending power, how the dickens are you ever going to buy what the machine makes? You can't. And this is the phenomena that's coming. This is coming at us like a steam train. Debt is not going to be liquidated. We can't physically do it. We can't mathematically do it under the existing system. It's designed to achieve a certain purpose, and that is the escalation of debt, the impoverishment of individuals, of communities, of nations. And that's exactly what there is achieving. Now, we've got to actually review this thing. It's weaponizing money to the point of enslaving the whole world. That's what this is about. And the national dividend, as a proposal, undoes that in one foul swoop by providing sufficient spending power to liquidate prices so that debt is no more. Debt is in the natural world, there's no such thing as debt. You can't pay for next year. With this year, you've got to actually consider that next year you need the rain, you need the sun, you need the soil, you need the warmth, you need all of these things, the breeze, the wind, all those things. And next year will have its own problems. But this year, has been paid for with the rain that we've already had, with the sun that's already shone, with the wind that's already blown, with the materials, the know-how, the technology. It's already paid for. And our financial system doesn't reflect that. It shows a debt. And that's the issue. The national dividend, as a proposal, alleviates debt as a way of controlling people. And that's what this thing is all about. It's about power. Power over young people who are coming out of school indebted. Power from over homeowners who are trying to get a home and raise a family. It's taking that power away and placing it where it belongs, in the hands of the individual. Eve.
Yeah, it's amazing that I'm looking for this article where it says uh, the moralist who will say there's no such thing as a free lunch, and you just hit the nail right on the head there. Yes, there is lots that is free.
Yeah, lots
People
that's
think
free.
that
Yeah,
that is a false statement. It's a lie that you're telling us right now,
yeah,
because we have the sun, we have the water, we have the
yeah.
wind,
hmm
we have the river. Uh, everything is there for us to enjoy, not
mm
take advantage of, but enjoy and live with it.
hmm
And we have the technology that has made us so we could have more leisure, more
Yeah.
time with our family, with our friends,
hmm
maybe practice a little more charity
hmm
towards the people that are less fortunate than us.
hmm
They're sick. I
hmm
mean, there's so many things uh, that we could say about this. It's anyway. The article is in there, and I read it last night again, and it's very interesting. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and I would jump at that right away. It says you're a liar.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Right
right.
in
I've
your
just
face.
I've just watched. I've just flown across the state, and I've watched the rain, and I looked at the grasses growing, because we're coming spring, just started spring,
Yeah,
and the grasses are just going bunter, and it's going to be some really good harvesting. Now that free lunch is the rain. That free lunch is the wind. It's the sunshine, the soil, the microbes in the soil. No one buys those microbes, and yet they're the microbes that actually cause the life forces of the plants. They actually feed the plants. All those things that are going on that you haven't paid for. Labour becoming less and less and less. There was a saying once by was it the Marxist, that labour produces all wealth. What an absurd statement. Labour hasn't caused it to rain. Labour hasn't caused the sun to shine. The technology that we have, advanced control, robotics, automation, electrical power, solar energy, all the things that we have, these are the fruits of past labour. They're our cultural inheritance. They don't belong to anyone. And yet we are restricted in access to it by what I would describe as a fraudulent financial system. And the
right.
fraud is demonstrated every day by the debt clock. If it's not in equilibrium, if the debts are not being cancelled as quickly as they're being generated, even with all this energy going in to produce, and in the end, you've got to ask the question. I mean, I asked it the other day of a group. If you were in, say, I'll name, say, Texas, because I understand Texas is a very strong military presence and military industrial presence in that state. If all those individuals who are currently engaged in military activities were given a dividend, would they still want to be part of that machine? Or would they just be at peace and say, nah, I'll hang up my spurs, I don't need that. I'm at peace with who I am, I've got sufficient, and I don't need to be part of that campaign. And that to me is the moral question that needs to be answered. It is a moral question. If there's a sufficiency, then you don't need to pursue work and do things that you wouldn't want to do. Closing comments, Eve.
I'd like to say that I read an article yesterday, or I actually was on Facebook. Somebody sent me a funny thing, and the guy was working. I think he was a fireman, and he says these are the real workers, the of America. And I thought to myself, so I answered that. I didn't say much, and
Mhm.
I put at the bottom a comment that says "holy work." So think what you want with that word. Work is yeah, it is important.
Mhm.
We're made to do work, but it doesn't have to be a factory. It doesn't have to be uh, working for anybody. It could be your own work at home, fixing your roof that's
Mhm.
leaking,
Mhm.
renovating your house that it's falling apart. I mean, it's fix the pollution, the rivers. So we're going to come up. We've got the money now. If we had social credit, we would fix that pollution right here and there,
Mhm.
and we'd fix our dumps. We'd fix. Uh, it would be a tremendous. Yeah, it is paradise, and
Mhm.
that's what we're supposed to do in our life, is to try to build a uh, kingdom of God, whether it's on earth or not. Our
Mhm.
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be
Mhm.
thy name. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So
Yeah.
we just have to follow up with our not only instinct but our love of God, our love of nature,
Mhm.
and everything will come together. But we need social credit before long,
Mhm.
so that we can do that.
Yeah. No worries. I really appreciated your discussion this evening. Thank you, Eve. This is Arnie Luks at the Freedom Forum. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Cheers.
Yeah, good day.